Hi, and welcome to the first ever Chardee MacDennis Dynasty League podcast. I promised our faithful commissioner that we would do one at the start of the season, and yeah, that never happened, so I apologize, but we're here, and we're doing it just in time for the playoffs. I will be your host, Erik, of the Birds of War, and I'm very honored to have one of our I don't know what you want to call it, but another owner in the league, and your team is invincible, if I'm not mistaken, right, Fred?
The gang gets invincible, yes.
Okay, so our whole plan here is to kind of review everyone's team, see how you're doing now, for the future, whatever. Just quickly go into some playoff discussion that we have two matchups to talk about, and to wrap up, we'll talk a little bit of Devi for whatever we know. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Fred?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I'm fairly novice in all things. It's Always Sunny. I've seen the show. I've seen a season and a half, maybe. So I don't know it probably as well as a lot of the people in the league, but it's a fun concept, and some people have really gotten into it. I've seen the show. I've seen a season and a half, maybe. I don't know it probably.
Okay. I just had a little bit of inception because I had the YouTube thing playing while you were talking. So I missed everything you said. I apologize.
It wasn't important.
Okay, but I heard you talking about It's Always Sunny and how good it is. I think I got that part. I'm not sure. I heard they're taking It's Always Sunny down off Netflix.
I think I read that from someone in our chat, and I'm not happy about it because I need to catch up on a lot of seasons. So we have to find some other way to get them.
Yeah, I've always watched them on Netflix. I kind of have been watching some new shows. I haven't been watching my reruns, and It's Always Sunny is always up there. But I'm going to have to buy some box DVD sets or subscribe to wherever they're going to be because I really do like the show. And I really need to – I mean, I've seen every episode, but I'm due for a rewatch because every time someone brings up something, I'm like, yeah, I think I saw that episode. I'm terrible memory, if you haven't noticed. I am terrible with remembering TV episodes. Okay, so I guess we'll just trade off talking about teams here. And if I could actually have the document up. We're just gonna go in order as you find it on your MFL screen. And the first one we're going to talk about is the winner of the Kitten Mittens division, Poppins the Indestructible. The owner's name is Julia, or some of us know her as Swan. She went 16-10. Not a bad start to the season, or the league, I should say. But anyway, her key players here are Cam Newton, Alvin Kamara, Antonio Brown, and Marvin Jones. As per her normal strategy in most leagues, she has all of her picks. She generally doesn't trade them. And, you can't blame her for her. 16-10, she might have even done better if she had this team from the start. She took over for the other woman that disappeared.
Yeah, I was going to say, this was like mid-draft too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that the woman drafted Antonio Brown. Then she clocked out on the second pick. And then all of a sudden, Andrew scrambled to get a new owner, and Swan took over.
Yeah, good on her. I mean, she got to put kind of her own stamp on the team, but had to scramble a little bit to, who wants Antonio Brown? I mean, what kind of a pick is that?
Yeah, I'm sure she's not complaining about that right now. I know it was like the second pick, and everyone's like, no one would take Antonio Brown second. But, if he plays for, as long as Larry Fitzgerald's been playing, who cares about how many years he's going to play? That's still a great pick. It's one of the best assets to have in the league.
Can't complain. I mean, I did a similar thing in the Marvel League where, it was super flex instead of single quarterback, but Brown fell to me in the middle of the first round, and I said, sure, why not?
Yeah, it's definitely the safest pick probably for any receiver. in any league you do, no matter what the rules are. But moving forward with her team, if we look at her Devi asset, it is Gesicki, tight end out of Penn State, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. And why don't you bring us into the highlighted trade for Julia?
Yeah, the only one we have listed here is her trading away Mike Gillislee to get Tyler Croft and a 4th-round pick next year. I think I don't have her full roster here in front of me. I need to pull that up. But Gillislee hasn't been stellar, but Croft has filled in really nicely for Tyler Eifert. He's been not a 1-for-1, but maybe like 85-90% of what Eifert will give you. So in this league, that is tight end premium. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I think as I'm looking at her roster, I have it up right now. She is the Greg Olson owner in this league, so she needed one. I'm not sure when she traded for Croft because she also has Kittle out in San Francisco, and I know he missed a week right around his bye week. So maybe it was just a depth trade. She was able to trade away Mr. Gillislee, who kind of, as you said, slowed down and was able to get a tight end. So for someone who's notorious for not trading, good on her.
Yeah, this trade was made about a month ago on November 9th. So this was, kind of in the push for the playoffs, and it was looking like Olsen wasn't coming back soon enough, and Dwayne Allen was a big bust. Kittle was, here and there. So getting somebody who's a little more of a consistent scorer makes a difference for her.
Okay, Fred. So why don't you bring us into our next team?
Sure. Up next we have the Jabronis. They made the playoffs as our number 6 seed overall. Their key assets are Kirk Cousins, Leonard Fournette, Gronk, and Golden Tate. And this team has 8 2018 picks from rounds 2 through 4. Devi asset is Christian Kirk from which A&M is this? Texas A&M?
Yeah, Texas.
Wide receiver. Looks like as solid of a team or as balanced of a team as you're going to get in an 18-team league. It's got somebody good at every position, which is hard to do. You want to talk about the transactions?
Yeah, sure. So the trade that we decided to highlight here was the Jabronis giving up their 1st-round pick. In return, he received Dion Lewis, Danny Amendola, and a 3rd-round pick. And I'm pretty sure this was a trade that happened kind of mid-season too when Dion Lewis started doing well. It's kind of scary owning those Patriots running backs long term, but his first is also a late first, more probably closer to 13, 14. So I mean, in some leagues that's an early second. So it's not like he's giving up a real first for this trade, but I think that this trade was because he was a playoff team, and you can't fault him for trying to bolster the lineup any way he can.
Yeah, I think because he's a playoff team, that can be no worse than 13th, and could be a lot worse, or could be a lot later than that even. This trade was made in late October, so this was before Dion Lewis really started getting his legs under him. So I think it was maybe a little bit of a speculative trade, but it worked out really well.
All right. So definitely a team that's, like you said, is balanced, and we'll have to try to survive that Gronk suspension this week.
Yeah,
but moving.
It doesn't have a whole lot else at tight end. Jermaine Gresham, unfortunately. Lance Kendricks and Richard Rodgers from Green Bay. So he's kind of scrambling there this week.
Yeah, and I was in a league where, unfortunately, I had Gronk go down. My other tight end options were Zach Miller, who broke his leg, and Griffin on the Texans. He got injured early in the season. So I actually had no backup. So I picked up Josh Hill and started him. He got me 3 points.
Take everything you can get at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I had Sanu starting in that league too. But anyway, before I go on a ramble on my other teams, let's move on to our commissioner, who the implication, who missed the playoffs with a mediocre 13-13. That's right. It doesn't get any more average than that. We're going to look at his biggest assets here, and he's got Jared Goff and Andrew Luck at QB. So, I mean, if Andrew Luck ever decides to come back from Europe, he could get some value at QB because there's no reason to roster both of them. He had some tough luck with Dalvin Cook. I'm not sure. It looks like he traded for him, which we'll talk about in a bit. But he's also got Derrick Henry and Alshon Jeffrey. He traded away all of his lower picks. He still has his first, which I'm assuming is probably right down the middle of the league, probably like a 9th or a 10th overall pick since he went 13-13.
Yeah, I don't know what our criteria is for draft picks, if it's potential points or record. But yeah, he should be somewhere in the middle right there.
Yeah, and I think it's potential points. I think I looked it up because obviously I have some interest in the draft since my team kind of sucked this year. But I think it's potential points. You're going to have to take my word, but I'm not 100% sure. But so he's also got Derrick Henry and Alshon Jeffrey, as I said, in his first. He's got some value here. You know, I didn't list the tight end, so I don't think there's anyone worth noting there. Oh, he's got Njoku. So this is again, it's a lineup that you're not really going into next year thinking I needed to find some people to make this team work. I think he can make it work next year.
And you went over the key assets, but he's got depth everywhere as well. I mean, he's got McKinnon, he's got Corey Davis, he's got Alshon Jeffrey, he's got Moncrief if he ever does anything, he's got Perriman and Treadwell. So he's got a bunch of lottery tickets that if any of them, come up Millhouse, he's going to be looking really good next year.
Yeah, so definitely on our teams to look out for in 2018 is our commissioner. Don't sleep on him. His Devy asset is Royce Freeman of Oregon. And I highlighted a trade, but I think it was with you, so I'll let you take it over, Fred.
Yeah, absolutely. This was leading into our trade deadline. I was looking for win now ability to make a push in the playoffs, and gave away Brashad Perriman, Derrick Henry, and injured Dalvin Cook to essentially get DeAndre Hopkins. He threw in a couple of other scrubs on his team as well, but it was for Hopkins. It immediately paid dividends because Hopkins played great final week of the season and pushed me into the division win. So that locked up number 2 seed overall and gave me a bye. So it ended up being a really good trade, I think, for both sides here. He gets some really nice future running back depth to add to what he's already got, and I get a guy who can hopefully push me over the top this year.
Yeah, and you know what? Even if Dalvin Cook, forget about the injury, I don't think you overpaid. And I mean, one of your running backs was injured. Of course, that didn't matter to him because I'm sure when he made this trade, he wasn't really looking to make the playoffs. But Dalvin Cook, while he is a promising running back, I don't think that, adding Derrick Henry really is that much more for a receiver who is literally tearing it up and continues to tear it up.
Well, I think the scoring settings come into play a little bit here because we get points per rush. And Derrick Henry may not be getting the full workload this year, but going forward, I still like him to be, the number 1 guy in Tennessee. If and when Murray ever retires or breaks down. I'm trying to remember if I think he offered me this trade, and he was the one who put Brashad Perriman in there, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. If you want him and you're going to give me some kind of value, I will absolutely trade him away because I'm 90% convinced that he's never going to be much of anything.
Right, yeah, Perriman definitely had the opening this year with those receivers and couldn't break through.
Unfortunately, he's got a quarterback that can't really get him the ball.
That's true too. But Fred, why don't you bring us into our next team?
Absolutely. Next team is Manhunters United. They finished the season at 11-15. Have some nice key assets here. Deshaun Watson at quarterback, Lamar Miller, Keenan Allen, Jimmy Graham, and 10 2018 picks, with 3 of them in the first round. His Devi asset is Deion Kane, wide receiver from Clemson. And with no trades after the startup. So he might have, I don't know if I didn't look to see if he had wheeled and dealed during the draft, but based on the players that he's got on this roster, or the important ones, he looks like he could be a force to be reckoned with, if there's depth to match it.
Yeah, and I'll chime in right here. He does have depth, and he did make moves. There's one we're going to be talking about later where he actually selected Deshaun Watson with the pick that he traded for.
Gotcha.
So not only did he trade for a pick, but he made a successful pick with trading, which has got to feel great. He's also got Kenyon Drake on the team. He has Marquise Lee, I might have said, Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, Robert Woods. I don't know who I mentioned in the previous, or you mentioned in the previous one, but he's got depth and he's got picks, including 3 firsts. So this team is really set up, and unfortunately for this division, it looks like there's 4 teams that will be competing next year.
Well, it looks like there's going to be at least 2 with our commissioner and Manhunters, because they're both strong with talent and picks, or with youth and picks. Whether the 2 teams on top currently, or the 2 playoff teams this year can hang with them, will be a nice discussion over the summer.
Yeah, so it's one of those strange situations where the teams that didn't make the playoffs are actually better suited for the future. As of now, things always change, but definitely not a normal occurrence in leagues.
Well, I mean, that strategy plays into it as well. If these guys weren't necessarily trying to win this year and just setting themselves up for all other years, then yeah, I mean, great. I mean, somebody has to win the initial year, or someone has to be competitive. Someone has to take those older veterans and try to squeeze everything they can out of them. And it looks like these 2 owners did not take that route at all. They're like, nope, we're gonna go youth. We're gonna go guys who could turn into something, and go from there. Okay,
so as we get to the tail end of this division, we will now talk about the Nightcrawlers, who finished with a 9-17 record, and this is James's team. His key assets right now are Carson Wentz, OBJ, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, and he also has 3 firsts stacked up for the draft. So another team that will either be active in the draft or maybe looking to make some trades this offseason. His Devi asset is Bo Scarborough. I don't know if that's how you say it, but he's the Alabama running back, the big guy. Let's see. Not his first trade, but one of the important trades is that he was able to give up Case Keenum, a 2nd and a 4th, to get a 1st and a 3rd from Dr. Mantis Toboggan. What are your thoughts there, Fred?
That's actually a really that trade can go either way, because I'd like to know when it was made, because Case Keenum now is looking like he might be worth that 1st round pick. If he keeps playing the way he is and can carve out a role for himself, or become a starter either in Minnesota or somewhere else next year, he's looked pretty legit, and that team is going to be around for a while.
Right. So maybe the value wasn't what he expected, but I think the Nightcrawler was still okay with Carson Wentz there at quarterback.
Oh yeah, and exactly. He definitely had the depth to be able to move him and get a premium price, really. I mean, especially in a league where it's not super flex and you don't technically have to start a quarterback. With bye weeks and everything else, you can get by with a zero quarterback start. To be able to get a 1st round pick back from a guy like Keenum and your own 2nd, Yeah, awesome deal.
One thing to note, he has some injured guys pretty much stashed. He obviously had OBJ, which we mentioned before, but he also has Edelman, Kenneth Dixon, and Spencer Ware all stashed away. So he doesn't have the depth that some of the other teams do in this division, but all these injured guys that are getting him 0 right now will certainly not get him 0 next year. So his team will be stronger regardless of what moves he decides to make before the draft.
Yeah, and how many picks did we say he's got?
He's got 3 firsts, and he also has a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, he's gonna have pieces to play with next year. That's for sure. Whether he takes rookies with those or deals them for guys who can help his team, the more immediate. But looking at the way the other teams ahead of him in this division, or the other teams along with him in this division, are set up, he may just want to take youth and push off again next year as well. Okay, so let's talk about the last team in this division. You still with me, Eric?
Yeah, I'm still here with you.
Pepe Sylvia finished a dismal 3-13. Wait, that can't be right. Is that enough games? 3-13? That's only 16 games.
Oh, well, he's got to be like 3-23,
maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds better. No, it sounds worse, but I think that's more accurate. He does have some decent assets as well. He's got Phillip Rivers and Amari Cooper. And the 101 pick next year. His Devy pick is Saquon Barkley from Penn State, who would be the number 1 overall pick in just about everybody's mind. So he's sitting pretty here with the 101 and another 101 essentially. He can take another Devy pick with that, or whoever the best non-Devy player to come out of this draft is, and there's always somebody.
Yeah, and I think in this case, he's probably better off taking somebody that's going to be drafted that you could get good value with this year. Take a Devy guy later. He can keep taking the 101, and he can keep taking the best Devy prospect. But in a league like this, I don't think it's enough of a pipeline to keep funneling your team. Barkley, if the hype does get really strong, especially coming right out of the gate. So maybe, you can flip that for say 3 firsts or 2.5 firsts, something like that. I guess you can keep doing that and gain value. But at some point, I think your best option may be to get another young guy going into the draft now, taking a Devy guy with, trading for another pick, even if you want it to be an earlier one. But as we'll discuss later in the Devy section, just because you pick the guy early doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be picked early. So there's no guarantees here. And that would be my strategy, but we'll see where Pepe goes. He's clearly a win-later team.
Yeah, I'm looking at his full roster here, and there's not a whole lot else that he has that's really doing good this year. Or he's got Amari Cooper who he can build around. Hopefully he proves to be worth where he's been drafted. He's obviously got Barkley, but he's got Terrell Pryor, and he's got Corey Coleman. So he's got some guys who maybe were sexy when we drafted in the summer, but some of the shine has come off of them since then.
And the one trade we have for him is that he gave up Witten and got a second from a team. That's a fine move. I think Witten's probably got a year or 2 left. So for a team that's win later, getting another pick is the way to go.
Absolutely. Good deal for him.
Okay, so that concludes the Kitten Mittens division. And I'll let you take this one away, Fred. You are the division leader right now, or the division winner this year for Wolf Cola division.
Yeah, thank you. Gang gets invincible. That's my team. Finished 19-7, won the division, and got the number 2 seed. my key assets are Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, DeAndre Hopkins, and Larry Fitzgerald. I've got first, third, and fourth picks next year, and Nick Chubb as my Debbie. So hopefully he continues his rehab and keeps getting stronger. Do you want to give an opinion of these trades, or do you want me to go over them?
Just to go over your roster real quick before we get into those trades, which for some reason I can't find your team on MFL. It's the gang. It's just named Invincible. That's
yeah.
the team name. Okay, so you definitely have some guys that we didn't mention, like Latavius Murray, Nelson Aguilar. I'm sure you could name a couple more guys here too. So this team you do have depth on top of your key players here.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call them great dynasty assets, but they've been good for me this year, and surprisingly good for me this year.
And you got Landry too.
Yes. Landry was one of the trades I think we'll talk about here. I made a couple of moves during the startup to try to move up to get the guy I wanted, and he was one of them.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that you got a well-balanced team both for the future and for now. And I guess we'll talk about that Jarvis Landry trade that you mentioned, where in the startup you gave up the 4-11, which turned into Martavis Bryant, and the 7-13, which turned into Doug Martin. And you were able to receive the 3-11, in which you drafted Jarvis Landry, and the 10-08, which you drafted Latavius Murray. And I mean, this looks like a steal for you. Like, Landry has been so much more productive this year than Martavis Bryant. He has one of the lowest floors of the receivers in the entire league. And
highest floors.
Highest floor, yeah, sorry. Highest floor. And like, you know what his future is. You know he's going to be the PPR receiver wherever he goes. Where Martavis Bryant is now seems like a more big risk than when he was suspended for marijuana.
Exactly. And, I think you look at this trade, you look at the players who were taken at the time, and I think most people would say they prefer to be on the Martavis Doug Martin side. Tavius Murray, didn't particularly have a defined role. He was coming off of an injury. They had Dalvin Cook, who was looking great right from the start, and I think Landry even started out pretty slow along with Miami. So it's more of a hindsight good trade than if you look at who took who with the picks who were involved.
Yeah, and you made a lot of startup trades. You were one of the more active ones. But if you just go through your teams across the board, it looks like you won these trades. So certainly someone where if I'm in a startup with you going forward, I may say, he knows something. Maybe I'll just ask him for his opinions rather than trade with him.
Yeah, I take try to mix a little bit of a redraft approach in to my dynasty startups, in the sense that I feel like other teams can tank for the future better than I can. So if I'm going to do well, it's going to be right out of the gate. So try to get players who I think may be a little undervalued in terms of where they're going to end up this season, and still have a role going forward. Or in some cases, like Larry Fitzgerald, just taking the old guy who I know is going to be a steady wide receiver one for the next 2, 3, 4 years, hopefully. And in terms of dynasty, he just gets forgotten.
Whatever your strategy is, it tends to work. I mean, across all the leagues we're in, you're either we're in the playoffs or continue to be in the playoffs in all those leagues. So it's impressive. It's really impressive from what I see.
I'll see if I can win anything out of all of this. So far, it's all just show until you win a playoff game or two.
Yeah, well, you'll
have
a bye week
than not.
So next week you're automatically in one league. You're in the Chardee MacDennis league, and only 2 wins away from the title.
Yeah,
I forget what they call it in the game. You just get to smash the other person's pieces. That's what I remember.
I don't think I saw that episode.
Oh my God! You need to see it. It's labeled Chardee MacDennis.
Okay.
And basically, Dennis and D have this game that they win all the time. So it's like rigged, and they you have to get plastered, and you have game pieces that you get to smash. The losers smash pieces when they lose. So definitely an episode you should check out. One of my favorites. But let's move on to the next team in your division. Hashtag Charlie work. That's Dusty's team, who went 18-8, and he had the number 5 seed in the playoffs. Well, still does. He has a matchup this week, which we'll get into later. Best players on this team are Derek Carr and Alex Smith, so he's got 2 QBs he can use. He's got Jordan Howard and LaShawn McCoy. He has the breakout man in himself, Adam Thielen, and Mohamed Sanu, and he owns his own first. Go ahead. His Debbie asset is LJ Scott, a Michigan State running back. But what were you saying, Fred?
Oh, I was starting to say, this team gave me fits all season long. We were kind of back and forth for our division lead. He was up by a game, and then we were tied, and then I was up by a game, and then we were tied. And it was a dogfight between the two of us. So it was fun to play against him, and it looked like his team kind of had the same run of luck that mine did for the most part, where he was getting good production out of guys who you wouldn't necessarily think of in like Alex Smith and Adam Thielen, just way above where they were drafted or expected to.
Yeah, and you look at his team, there's not anybody that sticks out like, oh, this guy's real young and he's real good. But there's nobody that's like, oh, this guy's getting old and you're not going to have him for a little bit. So this looks like a team that is either entering its prime or is in its prime, and should be for the next couple of years. So it definitely can be relevant going forward, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And there's one guy I'm looking at here. I want to see where he got him. Okay, so he actually did draft Ricky Seals-Jones, and that's already paying off for him as well.
Wow. That's a crazy tidbit right there. So what do you think? What trade do you think made the most impact?
Let's see what we've got here. The biggest impact for him was definitely the Alex Smith trade. He traded his 12th round pick and his 15th round pick to actually move down in the 12th round. And pick up an extra 14th round pick. So with the picks that he got, he drafted Alex Smith and Brian Hill, and the players that he gave up were Jake Butt and Carlos Henderson, to get a guy who was a top 6 quarterback for half, 2/3 of the season in the 12th round. Can't ask for anything better than that on a return.
And you know what? It's funny because when you're making a trade like this, and he actually traded down in the 12th round. So if you use in logic, he traded down from drafting Butt to get Alex Smith. So Alex Smith he wasn't, as bad as Butt. But then he moved up to pick up Brian Hill over Carlos Henderson. It's funny how these things work out, especially late. It wasn't a big move, but if he was targeting Alex Smith at the 12:03, he was able to wait 7 more picks and pick him up and, get his, his better shot on a flyer in an earlier round later.
Yep. And, just to real quickly go over the other interesting trade that he had, because it had some decent names involved with it. He gave up a 16th pick in the 5th round and the 603. I'm sorry. Yeah. He gave up those picks to get what turned into Adrian Peterson, LeGarrette Blount, Joe Williams, Carlos Henderson, and it looked like he actually drafted a second Devy player for some reason. Don't know what happened there, but kind of a wasted pick because we're only allowed one. But so giving up Evan Ingram kind of hurts going forward, but he's gotten 3 decent running backs out of this, and Carlos Henderson, who has has a chance. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, so he picked up Carlos Henderson, and then he ended up trading him later. So he doesn't have him anymore. But
he
Evan
used
Ingram
that to get Alex Smith.
Right.
But,
Evan Ingram for 2 older running backs and a rookie.
All right. So, Fred, why don't you take us into the next team in the division?
Sure. We've got Philadelphia, who finished at 14-12. This is John Barnes' team. He's from D96 as well, right?
Yeah, the name sounds he's probably the Philadelphia team, right? I can't remember his team name.
Not sure. So he's got a real mixture on his team here. He's got some fairly older guys. He's got Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger, Frank Gore, DeMarco Murray, and Brandon Marshall. But he's also got Jay Ajayi, Mike Evans, Crabtree, Alan Hearns, and Westbrook. So he's really, really kind of an odd split between old and young here. I don't know how many of those players will still be playing next year for the older guys. They could have a year or two left, certainly, but it wouldn't also surprise me if he lost a couple of them just to attrition. And his Devy player is Cam Akers from Florida State, running back.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job at summarizing it, Fred. A lot of those guys are near the tail end. And, I mean, at this point, you're almost better off riding these assets into the sunset instead of trading them because they usually feel like they're not worth it. If you're going to go for wins, which Steve finished over 500 this year, and certainly has assets to move forward, having that Devy player not come in, just, it eats up your Devy spot next year, as well as you're not getting anybody that, isn't with a pick. But definitely can survive for a year or two before he has to go into perhaps a folded in mode.
Yeah, and he's got his full complement of picks next year as well, so he can decide what direction he wants to go, and if he wants to trade those guys for some veterans or go for the younger guys who will help him in the future. He can, the kind of good thing about this team is that the way it's built, he has options. Talk about his trade here?
Yeah, sure. So he was able to give up pick 112 and pick 407, and he received pick 106 and 505. And so basically what happened is he traded up 6 picks in the first round, and he was able to move up to the Mike Evans spot. He traded away the 112, which was Christian McCaffrey, but I mean, I think everyone thought that was a little high on McCaffrey anyway. It was, I think DeAndre Hopkins went at 114, so he did trade up to get his receiver there. He traded back 1 round. He wound up giving up the 407, which turned into Devontae Adams, and he received the 505, which was Michael Crabtree. So he, gave up 1 round later to move up those 6 spots and get Mike Evans. He got a receiver that's probably just as capable, just not as young. So Devontae Adams definitely someone that he probably would rather have on his team than Mike Crabtree at this point. But they're both high caliber receivers in the league.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I think Mike Evans is still considered top 3, top 5. Dynasty receiver. But Devontae Adams is quickly getting there himself. Tampa Bay is kind of falling apart this year, and Mike Evans is disappointed. But I don't think people are shying away from him yet, the way I think they're starting to with Amari Cooper. People still believe they've seen the talent he's produced on the field. He's scored a shit ton of touchdowns. Part of it was Winston's troubles and injury this year as well, and Tampa Bay just essentially imploding. But yeah, I think you talk a little bit about Christian McCaffrey, and he was that real wild card rookie this year where people especially in PPR leagues, thought he was going to be like Marshall Faulk, and he certainly still could be, but it's not. They're not using him that way yet.
Yeah, and that's certainly what this. Well, I don't think he would have took McCaffrey if he kept that pick, but
oh no, certainly not.
It'll be interesting to see how McCaffrey develops, nonetheless. But let's move on to our next team in the division. And this is just two men who, to no surprise, have a co-owned team, Tyler and Jacob. They went 12-14 this year. They do have some depth on this team. It starts off with guys like Matthew Stafford, Melvin Gordon, and Joe Mixon, who, young. Stafford's in his prime, but the other two running backs, young and good dynasty assets. They are also able to have some depth guys in Randall Cobb, Sammy Watkins, Josh Doxson. They also have Ebron at tight end, and they have they still have their original picks for the 2018 draft. Their Devi asset is Lamar Jackson, the quarterback out of Louisville. He's in the Heisman voting, I'm pretty sure. And
that's the kiss of death, isn't it?
What?
Being a Heisman.
Oh, the Heisman. Yeah, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but he's definitely one of those quarterbacks that everyone was worried that he wouldn't come into the league well. And after seeing like a guy like Deshaun Watson, who kind of has the mobility like he does, playing great before he got injured, it gives even a quarterback who's performing really well in college, but not a traditional play style, more hope. And there's definitely a lot of hype around Lamar Jackson. But anyway, before we even get into him, because he won't be on the team till next year, he's still got good depth on this team, and they have a quarterback. So 12-14, they're really missing that one, home run to pull this team forward. But they also have the assets that they might be able to make a push for that home run threat and turn this team into a playoff team next year.
Yeah, looking at the depth here, it's kind of surprising this team ended up under 500. I don't know if it was just schedule quirks or poor lineup decisions or something like that, but it looks like, there's some guys who have been disappointed or underperformed this year, for, I think, some reasons out of their control. But he looks like he can be somebody who can fight for the division going forward. Oh, plus he's got a bunch of guys injured. All right. So let's take a look here at a trade he made. Let's see. So during the startup draft, he made a trade with Special Agent Jack Bauer. Just two men gave up the 310, 6'9", and 15'10". And those players turned into Tyreek Hill, Samaje Perine, and Philip Dorsett. And he received 208, which was Joe Mixon, 1118, Rico Gathers, and 1201, James Conner. So I think Tyreek Hill has been, I'd have to say, probably still a bit of a surprise in that he's scored as well as he has had this year for a second year in a row. But to get Joe Mixon and do we still consider James Conner to be the heir apparent to Le'Veon Bell when Pittsburgh gives up on him this year? Eric? You're not there anymore. Okay. So I'll just move along here. And we can talk about the next team while we wait for Eric to come back. The last team, I think this is the last team. No, one more team. Okay, so there's two teams left in this division. Wildcard Bitches finished 11-15. It's from owned by Alex. He's got several assets here. He's got Todd Gurley, Michael Thomas, and T.Y. Hilton. His Devy player is James Washington, wide receiver from Oklahoma State. And better than any of those players, he has the god, Dak Prescott.
Yeah, he does. For those of you that aren't in other leagues with me, I'm a Dak Prescott guy. But Alex here, he definitely has those three big hitters that can carry any franchise, especially in an 18-team league where we're kind of scurrying for players. You can easily turn that into depth and not like just mediocre depth. Or if he's able to build depth around it, he can really be a team to mess with. So again, like a lot of teams, a lot of leagues, I feel like I don't know what teams are doing. This league, I think everybody kind of has it figured out for the most part. Definitely a roster I would want to build around. And James Washington, for that matter, is one of the higher Devy guys too. So he's got another receiver getting into that receiver core that could be real good.
Yeah, I think that would be nice for him because I think no one really knows what to expect from T.Y. Hilton going forward. He's spectacular, but he's also just completely disappeared for most of this year.
Yeah, I think part of it is the product with having a QB come in who's not familiar with the system, and you see T.Y. go off for a little bit, and it's one of those things where I feel like if Dorsett was in the training in the beginning, he would be better. But Hilton also thrives on his speed, and speed isn't going to be there forever, and we don't know if he can be a possession receiver in this league. So it's, I think he would have been fine this year with Andrew Luck. I really do. But at what point is it like, well, if Luck isn't healthy or if he can't run super fast, like it's going to die off probably sooner than later.
He's not exactly young anymore either. He's 27, 28 years old. I mean, he's certainly in his prime, as they say, but he's just one of those guys where I don't think you're going to get as much for him today as it cost you to get him to draft him or to trade for him, a year ago.
Yeah, and that's certainly a good point, Fred. So yeah, let's look and see what kind of trades he made and if there's anything that really sticks out. A lot of startup trades for him. It looks like that's all he really made that was interesting. But one trade that he made that I found peculiar was that he traded for the 6-12, which he drafted John Brown, and he gave up a 9th round pick, which someone took the Notre Dame St. Brown receiver, a 10th round pick, which was Sproles, an 11th, which was Stills, and the 16th, which was Brock Osweiler. So he gave up a lot of later picks for a 6th round pick to upgrade, but he didn't really capitalize on that 6th round pick. John Brown really struggling with the injuries, depth out in Arizona, and the QB troubles out there. So
yeah.
No real winner on that trade.
John Brown was one of those guys that I really thought was going to have a bounce back year, and it feels like he's still not over the health problems that he had. He's actually already been announced inactive for this year. But just pulling up the league draft right now to see who went in that vicinity, who he could have had instead. Sterling Shepard was drafted at 6'14". Eric Decker at 6'18". Alvin Kamara at 7'02". I mean, it's easy to go back at the draft and say, oh boy, you really screwed that up. But he really screwed that up.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on from his team and move on to the last team in the division, which is my team, the Birds of War. This is Eric. And
you're in my division?
Yeah, I was down at the bottom. You were up at the top. Thanks for rubbing it in. But anyway, My key players right now are Aaron Rodgers, Zeke Elliott, Hunter Henry, and Jordan Reed. I also have stacked up 4 first-round picks, which I happen to know if our draft order goes by potential points, will be picks 3, 4, 5, and 7, which I'm very excited about. I also have 3 seconds there. My Debbie asset is Cortland Sutton, the receiver out of SMU. And the one trade that I made right before the deadline was actually with you, Fred. Yeah, it was actually with you, Fred, where I gave up Russell Wilson and I received Aaron Rodgers and your second-round pick. I kind of have Aaron Rodgers ahead of Russell Wilson, so I wanted to make this deal anyway. But in fairness to the league, I don't like leagues where people, kind of fold in and they like, oh, well, I like Aaron Rodgers more than Russell Wilson next year, and that's the only thing that matters. I knew I was giving you a quarterback that you view as a starter over your backup, Matt Ryan. So in order to make the switch, I was like, listen, you got to give me something. So I was able to get that second out of you, which I felt like made the trade more fair.
I did everything that I possibly could do to not give you that second round pick. And I don't know. I think that was the longest and most back and forth trade negotiation I've had in any league this season. It usually is a lot simpler for me to, either get my way or convince the other person that, yep, you really want to do that. But no, you stood your ground, and I can't tell you that Russell Wilson is worth Aaron Rodgers and a second round pick. But for me and the situation I'm in, I absolutely need it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I took that into consideration. I would never ask for that. I would think that's ridiculous. But it's a trade deadline. You're looking for that elite quarterback to push you over the edge of the playoffs, and so I felt like I owed it to the league. Like, hey, I'm going to let this guy have the QB1 as of right now in the playoffs. Well, I'm going to make him give me something substantial. So. I'm a big principle guy. I'm not going to sabotage people, and I'm not going to sabotage the league. I'm going to be making pickups, even though I'm not in the playoffs. I'm that kind of owner. So I felt like I owed it to the league. I'm glad we came to a deal, but you're right. We had like 7 counters back and forth, which is pretty crazy.
It felt like it was going on all day long. And then I want to say it was actually getting close to the deadline itself. I think our deadline wasn't kickoff. It was like 6 p.m. or something like that. And I was like, oh, fuck. If I don't get something here, if I don't get this done somehow, I'm going to be just kicking myself, in a couple of weeks when I'm eliminated, the first round.
Yeah. So besides the trade, I think my roster has, a couple good players. I'm clearly missing that receiver role, which I have a Devi receiver, so hopefully he helps me out. I don't have really much depth, which is a problem. But I do have a lot of picks, which I can either trade for depth or, even potential like star players, or I can do it the old Bainfort way, which is just draft them and hope for the best. He's an owner in one of our other leagues. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. I'm kind of going on the fly, but I think I'm set up so that I could definitely be a contender if things fall my way. We'll see if I trade any of those draft picks, and then I'll determine what the best course of action is for my team.
Well, speaking of the best course of action, this would be the right time to talk about Ezekiel Elliott and Jordan Reed, because I don't know if either one of those players is going to be on your roster come the beginning of next season. I don't know, what your strategy is or what you're thinking on either one of them is, but based on the composition of your team, it just doesn't look like they're the best choices for you at this moment.
Yeah, so the problem with Jordan Reed is that his value is more in the toilet more than it has been in a while. So I don't like selling low on guys. And even though it makes sense for me to sell him, this is a tight end premium league. And, that tight end that, isn't your, say, Cameron Brate or your Martellus Bennett, or, guys that you don't mind starting because you don't want to invest a lot in the position, but you get that elite tight end, and that pushes you over the edge. So I'm thinking tight end premium. I'm going to invest heavy in this tight end position so I can turn around and make value. And, of course, Jordan Reed gets hurt and is shit. And he's like a 1 or 2 guy when he's healthy. And also Hunter Henry started off slow. He's really coming around, which I like, and it's good to have. But the strategy didn't pan out for me the first year. Not even close.
Well, were you playing to win now when you drafted this team, when you set it up?
No, I traded for 3 other firsts, so I wasn't.
Okay, so that was during the startup you did that.
Yeah, during the startup I traded for 3 separate firsts, so I was really thinking win later, but I'm very dynamic. I switch on the fly, and Jordan Reed and Hunter Henry were just reasons to not worry about winning.
Yeah, absolutely, and to give up all of that value in the startup draft and still come out of it with Aaron Rodgers and Ezekiel Elliott, I don't think you can complain too badly.
Yeah, and you know what? I still managed 10 wins in a division that wasn't necessarily easy, and I had guys like I had the Zeke suspension, I had Malcolm Mitchell on the IR. Quincy Enunwa on the IR, although I might have drafted him later because he was on the IR. But needless to say, I got some people there that I like. Obviously, everything's not going to pan your way, but if the tight ends might have started off really well, I may have considered trading one and some first-round picks to go for it. But the way it fell, it was just much easier to wait for next year.
Yep. All right.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Next.
Why don't you take it away, Fred?
Yeah, actually. So let's move on to the Fight Milk division. We've got our number 1 seed, best record league, Beer, Beef, and Jesus, owned by Michael K. Finished the season at 22-4, and he's loaded. He's got a solid stud at every position. Tom Brady, Mark Ingram, Brandon Cooks, Zach Ertz. Doesn't have his first-round pick, but he's got his 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. For Devy player, he's got St. Brown, the aforementioned receiver from Notre Dame. And it looks like we only have one significant trade here where he gave up his 2nd-round pick. I'm sorry, he gave up someone else's 2nd-round pick to get Adrian Peterson. I think it probably worked out for him, here and there, spot start, bye week filler kind of thing. Give him some further depth at that position.
Yeah, so he's definitely, in a league where you're only starting 8 players and there's 18 teams in the league, to have a significant stud at each position, it's going to make you a dangerous team. He's also got Tevin Coleman and Marshawn Lynch on this team. At receiver, he's got Jordy Nelson, which unfortunately didn't pan out for him. But, that would just make this team even more deadly.
Aaron Rodgers is coming back in week 15, so he might be heating up again exactly when it matters.
And, that's not if Jordy Nelson will heat up. If Rodgers is back, Nelson's going to be, what he was, because nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is his quarterback, and they have that connection. So as long as Rodgers can play at that level, which assuming the Packers beat the Browns this week, they're going to want him to play. It can certainly turn around for him in the playoffs. So that's a good point. But as of now, it hasn't panned out for him. He's got a great roster. The way it works, you only got 2 matchups if you get the bye. So you and both Michael K will get to relax before your semifinals next week, and it's certainly one of the teams you're going to fear, right?
Yeah, if we play each other, it would be in the finals. If I make it that far, and he makes it that far. I'm kind of looking at this team now, going, I really don't want to have to play against them.
And he's got, Brady and Nelson are older assets, but next year his team could be just as good. I'm not really worried about the age on his team yet.
No, those guys are both playing at least next year and probably longer.
All right, so we'll get more into his team next week if we decide to do anything else. But we'll move on to the Nightman Cometh. This is Garrett's team. He's House Stark, if you're in the Game of Thrones league. He went 19-7, which claimed him the number 4 seed in the playoffs, the first wild card. First wild card. This team consists of Marcus Mariota, Le'Veon Bell, Kareem Hunt, Christian McCaffrey. Not sure what Adams that is. Is that Devontae Adams? Yeah, Devontae Adams and Delaney Walker. So this is probably my favorite lineup of the wild card teams, or the teams in the wild card round. The combination of Bell, Kareem Hunt, Christian McCaffrey, Devontae Adams. Like, oh God, it doesn't matter that he doesn't have any draft picks going forward. This is a nice, solid base to build around. His Devy asset is the Alabama receiver Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, and speaking of playoff matchups and looking at things, I think this is the team that I would play this next week if he makes it through this round. So I've been looking at this roster going, oh fuck, I don't want to put myself up against these guys.
Yeah, in an 18-team league, it doesn't get much better than it. Really doesn't. All right, so we'll talk about him in the playoff matchup. Fred, why don't you take the next team?
Yeah, I mean, before doing that, real quick, just looking at his trades here that he made, he gave up what turned. He has Christian McCaffrey, so so this is, I have it backwards. Yeah. Anyway, I'm trying to figure out what I've written down here, and it's
he was on the other end of the deal where he gave up the picks for Evans and Crabtree, and he got McCaffrey.
I see.
He's the owner that took McCaffrey 112.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So probably not the. For win now in the playoffs, probably not the player he would want to have at 112, but awesome going forward, probably still.
Okay, so next we'll move on to Dr. Mantis Toboggan. Take it away, Fred.
Yeah, this is a team owned by Michael W. He finished 15-11. His key assets here, I assume this is AJ Green, Travis Kelce, Devin Funchess, and Amir Abdullah. Is he still considered a key asset? Close enough.
Probably not.
His Devy player is Mason Rudolph, Oklahoma State quarterback. And trade here that he made during the startup draft was the picks that turned into Joe Mixon and Mark Ingram to give him Travis Kelce. He moved up from 208 to 118. But I think this is one that I think he would like to have back. It may be the difference between him being in the playoffs and not.
Yeah, and if you're looking at his team, he really doesn't have a quarterback option. He does have the Devy coming in, but Case Keenum, I guess, could turn into something. That's his best choice moving forward. But besides those assets that we mentioned, there's not much to like on this team. It's certainly a team that he only has a second and a fourth coming in the draft next year. He's going to need to do something with this team to make it better, in my opinion. I don't think 15-11 is in the cards for him next year. I think he's trending down as of now.
Got it. So beat up on him while you can, or hope he doesn't make some trades to improve his team in the offseason.
Exactly, Michael. You could turn me wrong. What do you think, Fred? You think it's better than what I'm saying?
No. I agree with you. I think he's got studs and duds approach. But you mentioned Case Keenum. He's a guy who is a complete wild card right now. He could be Minnesota's quarterback next season. He could be on the bench next week. Or he could be starting for someone else. Who knows what they're going to do with him? They've got almost an embarrassment of riches at the moment. and they're going to have to get rid of at least one of them.
Exactly. So, Michael, prove us wrong. You got it, buddy. We'll move on to the next team, third to last team. Sorry to get you guys all excited. It's Special Agent Jack Bauer, 12-14. This is Sean's team. He's got Jameis Winston, Carlos Hyde, Tyreek Hill, and Diggs. He's one of those owners that has no picks despite his 12-14 record, so trading away the picks didn't turn out how he'd like. His Devy asset is Joyce. I don't know how to say his name. The LSU running back. And his big trade was he was able to get – wait, is that true? Did he trade Kelsey to get Mixon and Ingram? And
that was the opposite side of the trade we just talked about. So, yeah, he gave up the 118 to get to drop back and get 208 and 608.
Yeah, and he also made a trade with me where he gave me his first-round pick for 616, which he selected Rob Kelly. So I would certainly take my side as of now. But I'm sure, when Rob Kelly was healthy, he was an RB option. In this league, they can be few and far between. So I can't really blame him.
Okay. I wouldn't have done it. I don't know what else was available at 616, but obviously he liked him enough to make that move, and it was looking like he was going to be the starting running back for the Redskins, and P. Ryan really hadn't shown much through training camp even. So Kelly got injured as well, but I was just never that much of a believer in him.
Yeah, so I feel the same way about Jack Bauer's team here. I'm not a fan of it moving forward. I think this is going to be one of the weaker divisions. He went 12-14. That even seems like it's going to be high.
Well,
based on what he has.
He's got some assets. He's got Carlos Hyde, Ty Montgomery. He's got Peyton Barber, who's showing some flashes. We mentioned Diggs and Hill, two good young receivers. He's got Tyrell Williams if he pans out, but that's really it. He's real thin at tight end. Doesn't have depth at receiver, but it's hard to do that in a league this large anyway. The thing that kind of hurts him here is Winston had a really off year and got hurt, and Bradford got hurt. Although I think probably everyone could see that Bradford was going to get hurt again because that's all he ever does.
Fair enough. Yeah, so you're a little more optimistic on Sean. I'm a little worried about his future, but you think he might be all right.
There's talent on the roster. So he's actually got P. Ryan as well, but he's sitting, I think, on his taxi squad right now.
All right, so why don't you take us into our penultimate team?
Yes. Everyone's favorite penultimate team, going America all over everyone's asses. This is owned by Brian Williams, House Egan from Game of Thrones. He finished at 10-16 this year, second worst in the division, or fifth best, if you want to put it that way. His key assets are Drew Brees and David Johnson. It's a great start. Jamison Crowder, Kyle Rudolph, and OJ Howard. Good tight ends to have in a TE Premium League. And he's got N'Keal Harry, receiver from ASU. So he's got room to move up. Made what do we have here for a trade? Is that he gave up? What did he give up?
He gave up his first, his second.
First to get to get what? That can't be right.
Yeah, so what he did here, he traded away his first round pick, his second round pick, and a 9th round startup pick.
Oh, I see.
Of the 5th round startup pick and a 16th round startup pick. That was exactly my team.
Got it. So that pick, he traded away his future to get Jamison Crowder. essentially.
Yeah. I mean, at the beginning of the season, this looked like a terrible trade for him, but Crowder actually has been playing well.
He's turned into the go-to guy on the Redskins, I think, because none of the other receivers have developed, and Jordan Reeves is out. So he's got a really good rapport with Kirk Cousins. The problem I have with it is that I'm almost certain Kirk Cousins isn't going to be on this team next year, and Crowder is really just a slot guy. So it really depends on what situation he's in going forward.
And I think that's a lot of what Bryant has done here with his team. He's got Drew Brees, which, I mean, that's more of a run team now. I don't see Brees retiring yet, but his years are certainly limited. And he's got David Johnson come back from that injury. But I don't think he has the depth to overcome some of the holes on his team. So maybe he was just, hoping to hold on to David Johnson to sell him later on. It looks like his Devy asset probably won't declare for the draft this year unless something has changed recently. And no significant picks. So there's not a lot of room to gain value other than to trade. And if he's interested in competing next year, I don't think rostering David Johnson is his way to go. I think he's got to break it up into smaller assets and spread them around.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him move Drew Brees as well. He's still got good name recognition. If he gets a little bit of hype, I almost don't want to have to say he needs it, but like you said, this feels like it's starting to turn into a running and defense team.
And if any of you guys have been in a league with Brian before, he is the type of owner who will push all in even when he doesn't have that many chips or when he doesn't have the best hand. He is willing to give in all of his picks and say, I'm going for it. And if it doesn't work, he looks back at it and goes, I still would do it every time. So it's the type of owner he is. So I'm not sure what his trading strategy is coming off a bad year with a stud like David Johnson, but he's certainly an active trader. So that's going to be fun to monitor over the next few months.
And that's something this league needs a little more of is active traders. It felt like, after the startup draft, almost nothing happened all season long until the trade deadline. And, I was able to swing a couple trades just because I was working the phone lines, as it were.
Yeah, so you heard it here first. I mean, you listen to this podcast. Start trading, scrubs. All right? Thanks. All right, but let's talk about the last team. Frank's Little Beauties. Love that episode of It's Always Sunny. That's Alex's team, and he went 5-21, so not a good year for Mr. Alec. He's got Des Bryant, Demaryius Thomas, two older receivers, Devonta Freeman as well, and he also has Tyler Eifert, which, I mean, definitely someone he'd spent a higher pick on in this league, but you got to be concerned about his future. Traded away his first, I think, his first. And he's got picks in the second, third, and fourth round. His Devy asset is Sam Darnold, the quarterback from USC, who, I mean, rumors are that he might not even declare, but I think he's going to declare. I think that's just a silly rumor.
Yeah, I don't really pay a ton of attention to Devy or to college football, honestly, in general. Once they declare for the draft and they show up at the combine is when I start to really scout some of these players or pay more attention to them because they're coming online, as it were. So if he's going to be not declaring this year, I think that's a big mistake. Not a mistake, but a big red X for this league because we only are allowed a single Devy player. And then he's kind of stuck with him for a second season.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you there. Do you see any?
I'm looking at his roster right now, trying to see anyone else who's worth mentioning, and I think you got it. He's got a couple older guys. He's got guys that just didn't pan out. Thomas Rawls, Eddie Lacy. He does have Duke Johnson, who's put in a pretty good year this year. But the upheaval in Cleveland has already started. So who knows what that roster is going to look like next year?
Yeah, I don't think this Des Bryant and Demaryius Thomas. I don't think these are the home for those players. I think they're older receivers that should be on teams competing now. I mean, by time he's able to turn this roster around, because clearly it's lacking in some major holes, they're going to be retiring. So there's no reason to hold on to him for now. I don't think next year is a year for him to compete, especially since he doesn't have his first. And at best, he's going to have a quarterback that overperforms his expectation in Sam Darnold. I think it's time to give those guys up, get some younger assets, and go from there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think when he has the ability to get back into the trading season here, those guys should be moved along for picks or youth.
Okay, so I think we did all 18 teams there. I think it took us a little over an hour, but not bad considering we had 18 teams to cover. I hope you guys enjoyed that. But our next portion will be to go over the wild card matchups of the playoffs. The one thing I want to mention is we were recording this on Friday, December 9th, or Saturday, December 9th. It just turned midnight here in the Eastern time zone. So the Thursday night game already happened where the Falcons beat the Saints 27. So we'll be talking of those games with the results at hand. But what matchup you want to talk about first, Fred?
The first one on my screen is Jabronis versus Poppins.
All right, so let's get into it. Poppins, Julia's team, she gets a home field advantage. So if you were the higher seed coming into this week, you get a 10-point advantage. So the Jabronis is going to have to be able to beat Poppins by 10 in order to advance into the next round.
Yeah, and if you look at the projections on the MFL page, these two teams are within quarter point of each other at this point. And that doesn't take into account the home field advantage. So I think this may come down to that as the difference in this game. And if it does, that would be tremendous for Poppins to be able to pull it off that way. But where do we stand right now for what the score is?
So besides the 10-point advantage, Poppins has had Kamara get injured in that first quarter for 6.4 points, which is really not that bad for a running back that got injured really early.
No, he was doing great for the first couple of plays, and so yeah, that almost makes up for what he was projected to do. So her score is now just a few points lower than what it would have been if he hit what his number was. So she's a little bit behind the eight ball going into Sunday's games, but you can't. It all depends on who does what and who shits the bed, who gets hurt.
Yeah, and if we go by matchup, she has Cam Newton, and the Jabronis has Kirk Cousins. And despite Kirk Cousins' bad game last week, I'm going to give the they're both going up against tough defenses. Cam Newton has Minnesota, and they've been pretty good lately. Cam Newton is one of those quarterbacks that I feel like isn't necessarily like the easiest to defend. So like even though Minnesota might be able to cover the receivers, he could still run for 80 yards, and you're like, well, I guess it doesn't matter how good your quarterbacks are when you're playing Cam Newton. But there's definitely one of the better defenses in the league, and Kirk Cousins has the great secondary of the Chargers to compete with. Coming off a bad week, maybe Kirk Cousins does have that, I throw it to everyone mentality. No receiver has 12 receptions on that team. There's 5 receivers that have 5 receptions. So maybe he's able to, pick apart matchups. But I would say they're both tough matchups for the quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I live in the DC metro area, so I listen to local radio, and things are not happy in the Redskins locker room right now. Players are starting to get snippy with each other. Management is starting to get snippy with players. This has the feeling of a total team implosion during a West Coast trip that they don't want to be on. I mean, you normally worry about West Coast teams traveling east, playing early game, but this is a team that's leaving town, and I think they're taking all their problems with them. And on top of that, they're kind of flying into a weather situation or a fire situation in Los Angeles right now. They may not know exactly where their game is being played yet, or when. So I think this could be a very, very bad game for the Redskins. But in Cam Newton's defense, he's also playing a really good defense, but he gets them at home.
Right. So maybe So maybe I thought it was maybe a push really on this QB matchup. Maybe it's a little bit edge Poppins with Cam. What you said about Washington, but certainly something that the Jabronis is going to need to pick up if he hopes to win this matchup. But we'll move on to the running backs, where he definitely has the edge, knowing that Kamara only got 6.4 points. He has Leonard Fournette going against a tough defense in Seattle, and then Deion Lewis going against the Dolphins. Meanwhile, Poppins had Kamara already go and has Bilal Powell against the struggling Denver Broncos.
Yeah, I've been hearing really nice things about Bilal Powell's prospects this week. He could have a real big game. And speaking of teams that are imploding, I think that's the same thing is happening in Denver is happening in Washington. That the coach has lost the locker room, or management has lost the locker room, and they're all just playing for themselves at this point.
And while you said you heard great things about Bilal Powell, I'm in New Jersey, so I hear New York sports radio all the time, even though I just play in New Jersey. Don't need to get into that. The problem with Bilal Powell is not the talent, and it is not the way they use him. It's the amount that they use Bilal Powell. They have a three-headed monster, and it's stupid because Bilal Powell is clearly the best back. And everybody that's a Jets fan will tell you, oh, why don't we use Bilal Powell more? But instead, you're going to keep seeing Elijah McGuire and Matt Forte steal Powell's carries. And unless one of them is injured, I still don't feel comfortable starting Powell in any matchup.
Good to hear.
And I'm a big Powell fan. I own him in several leagues that we're in, Fred. The problem is that it's a timeshare, and you never know who's going to come out and do well, and it sucks.
All right. So let's take a quick look here at the receiver matchups.
But right before we do that, I'm taking the Jabroni running back matchup. He's going to need to score significantly more points than Julia's team here to capture a win, in my opinion. But even with Fournette's tough matchup, I will take them to outscore Poppins' running backs by 15, 20 points.
Yeah, I mean, he's completely set up for it. I mean, we know Kamara was already short, and between Fournette, he gets a tough defense in Seattle, but Deion Lewis should run circles, and the rest of the Patriots will just destroy Miami this week. And then it's just really a question of, does Deion Lewis get into the end zone or not? I like his running backs versus hers as well.
Okay, Fred, take us into the receivers.
Sure. Jabronis have Danny Amendola, Robbie Anderson, Marquise Goodwin, and Golden Tate going up against Poppins, Doug Baldwin, Travis Benjamin, Antonio Brown, and Marvin Jones. So there's a little interesting Lions matchup here. Who's Matt Stafford's favorite target this week? Is it going to be Tate or Marvin Jones? One of them will be. It's very rare when they both score similar points in the same week. Elsewhere, Antonio Brown is Antonio Brown. I think nobody's talking about his toe anymore. And Robbie Anderson is playing lights out. You can probably give us a little insight on him. Doug Baldwin has a really tough matchup I think Russell Wilson's going to have a tough time scoring this week in Jacksonville, but if he does, it's going to be with his legs more than with his arms. And Danny Amendola's once again tearing up Miami.
Yeah, so I mean, it really comes down to that Detroit matchup that they have. The thing with Robbie Anderson is that he wasn't practicing earlier this week. I don't own him in any league, so I wasn't really following it. I think Talib is back this week for Denver. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some Robbie Anderson. And I know Robbie Anderson hurt himself doing something. So it's not as good as it usually is.
Yeah, it's showing hamstring, but it's also saying he practiced fully today.
Oh, okay. So maybe the injury isn't really a thing. Wait, I just read something. It would be utterly shocking if Peterman does not start. Is that true?
Oh, Tyrod Taylor?
Oh, yeah. So Peterman's going to start this week? I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Fucking crazy. Okay, but anyway, not to get distracted. If Doug Baldwin isn't playing Jacksonville, I think Poppins has the advantage here, but because of the matchups, it may be closer than I expected.
Yeah, and this is where nobody has any depth in this league, or it's hard to get depth in this league, where she has to start Travis Benjamin. And going back to what I said about Washington earlier, I think everyone on that team could be in for it, or everyone on San Diego's team could be in for a great week, but Travis Benjamin hasn't really been putting up numbers himself, has he?
Not consistently, a week or two. But the one thing that is good to note here is both teams don't really have that great depth, but the difference of Antonio Brown being the only real consistent stud in that lineup may be the difference maker in this game.
Absolutely.
And we'll move into the tight ends, where she has Tyler Kroft going against Chicago, and the Jabronis has Jermaine Gresham going against Tennessee.
Oh no, I'm thinking of Houston's tight ends. I always get them confused because Houston and Arizona, neither one uses their tight ends, right?
I mean, I think Houston uses a little more. Yeah, Bruce Arians never uses his tight ends. For some reason, he's been using them a little more. But I mean, if I'm looking at Jabroni's backup tight ends, it's he is Gronk suspended. That's right.
That's the difference. So that may end up being the complete difference in this game.
And he's got some Packers tight ends who are doing nothing too. So Gresham may be the start.
Yep. And that's unfortunate. I've got a Gronk problem in another league this week, and I'm on the hook because I don't really have anything to replace him with. And in this league where there's literally no waiver wire, there's nothing he can do. It's past the trade deadline.
Yeah, so I'm going to give the edge to Kroft here and Poppins. I probably like him 5 points more than I like Gresham.
Oh, easy. I think you could pencil in Kroft for red zone looks, and maybe 50-50 for a touchdown.
Yeah. So when it's all said and done, I think it's closer than after we talked about it. But I'm going to take Poppins to win by the home field advantage.
Yeah, home field advantage and loss of Gronk, I think, is the difference here.
All right, so we'll move on to our second matchup between #CharlieWork and the Nightman Cometh. Is that the right one? Am I looking at the right one?
That is. Yep.
Okay. Just to give you guys up to speed on what is happening right now, #CharlieWork had Mohamed Sanu, the Rutgers alum, go off for 21.3 last night. And the Nightman Cometh has a 10-point home field advantage. So Nightman Cometh coming into Friday down 11.3, but with a full lineup to go.
Yeah, that's basically negating it, the home field advantage right from the start. I mean, he was projected for 11-8 and put up 21. You're right. You're back to even.
Yeah, Sanu scored a touchdown, which definitely helps him. But it's a league where you get a guy like Sanu, who probably didn't cost you a lot, be that depth receiver who has been, pretty consistent for the most part this year, besides when he, missed a week or two because of injury. And I think those guys that if you could find those guys in this league to your success, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sanu is the big difference maker this week.
Yeah, and he's also got Alex Smith playing for him, and that's flip a coin. Which Alex Smith is going to show up? Is it the Alex Smith who's game manager, or the Alex Smith who's afraid that Patrick Mahomes is going to take his job and will do anything to keep that from happening?
And on the other side with Nightman Cometh, we have Marcus Mariota, who hasn't been that great all year, despite the Titans' success, and it has not been because of their offense. It's been because of their defense. Mariota might have one game over 20 fantasy points this year.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing he has going for him here is that he's got the stack with Delanie Walker, who appears to be the only receiver that Mariota has who's doing anything. So at least they can double up if they can get a red zone look or two. Did I lose you?
Fred, I hear you. I broke up for a second,
but
I heard you talk about Delanie Walker's recent success.
Very good. Yeah, and just to compare that to who Charlie Work has, he's got Jason Witten playing at tight end, and he's been another feast or famine guy. Which Dallas team do we have left? Is it, I don't think it's the Dallas team that played Washington last week is the real Dallas right now. They're still struggling, but he's been surprisingly consistent all season long. Even on one catch for 8 yards and a touchdown last week, but it still gives him almost 10 points.
It's true. And so, if we're looking at this matchup, what is the biggest difference maker for you? Do you think? I don't know. Like, I like the running backs that Charlie Work has, but they don't stack up to Nightman Cometh. Not close. And the question is, can Nightman Cometh receivers match up to Sanu, who already had 21 points, and Thielen, who's been red hot for #Charlie Work? And I don't think there's enough for Nightman Cometh to even win with the home field advantage.
I love Nightman Cometh's running backs on paper, but Kareem Hunt hasn't done anything for the last several weeks. Christian McCaffrey's been up and down. He's actually been getting a little bit better. And Le'Veon Bell's playing Baltimore in a game that essentially decides the division. So, wow, it's tough sledding for him, even though it looks like they should just be stellar. On the other side, Jordan Howard and Shady McCoy. I think Shady's actually projected for one of his best games of the season. I've been reading that Indianapolis gives up just huge games to every single running back, and that should continue again this week. LeGarrette Blount, you just hope he gets a touchdown, gets the short yardage work after everything else is done, and Jordan Howard's another guy, like Kareem Hunt to me. I mean, he's not as explosive, obviously, but he's been a guy who's given you good weeks, but completely disappeared in others.
Yeah. So I'm looking at those running backs. Those can easily bust out for Charlie Work, which would give an edge to Nightman Cometh. So maybe not as far away as I thought. But after considering all the options on this team, I'm going to take #Charlie Work to beat out Nightman Cometh by 7 points.
Very good. I think both of these games reasonably are within the home field advantage margin, and you could see both Nightman and Poppins winning because of it.
Okay, so there you have our predictions and our playoff preview. maybe next week we'll do just a playoff preview, keep it nice and short. But we're going to have 2 matchups next week, too, so we'll talk about the bye teams more if we do that. But one thing I wanted to discuss before we get off is just talk about the Devies a little bit. I know you don't really, as you said earlier, you don't really research it. But I actually compared all of our Devy picks to where one of the DLF members, Travis May, has them projected for Dynasty rookie drafts. And so I thought it was interesting to see when we took them in the startup, was it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just jump into that quickly for our last segment. You look at the beginning, and it was kind of chalk. Pepe Sylvia went into tank mode when he used his 3rd-round pick on Saquon Barkley, but, he is universally the 101 everywhere. So it was he had to spend that early pick, but it worked. You look, Special Agent Jack Bauer got Darius Joyce with the first pick of the 6th round. He's going to be, one of the first running backs taken after Barkley. I was the Birds of War, able to get Cortland Sutton at 8-10. I haven't seen him lower than receiver 3 on people's list. A lot of people have him as the 1 or right behind Mr. James Washington.
And you pretty much opened the floodgates here. I think people were not really willing to jump in and take their Devy pick as early as the first 2 went. But once you took Cortland, it seemed like everybody was like, "Oh shit, I got to get one."
Yeah, and it's funny because I was looking here, and the way I drafted, I traded away my 5th pick, my 6th pick, and my 7th pick, all for 1st-round picks in one way or another. So when I got to this 8th pick, I'm thinking to myself, I have Russell Wilson, who I then traded, but I have Zeke, and I have these tight ends. That's all I had at this point. And at this point, I was like, screw it. I'm just going future. I really like this receiver. I don't have any receivers yet. So if I could get a young, possible stud, it could really turn my team around. So that's why I went with Cortland Sutton there. James Washington wasn't touted to be competing with Sutton. Sutton was kind of the universal one when we did this Devy draft, or this draft in general. But it's definitely more of a question. I think a lot of people are taking James Washington now over Cortland Sutton, but they're definitely both good talents.
Yeah, I actually want to ask you about that because given the struggles that rookie receivers have had in the NFL the last couple of years, did that give you any pause for taking a wide receiver as your Devy pick?
Yeah, and I'm kind of always a receiver guy. If you look at all my teams across the board, I don't like running backs. It's a lot of flexes. I'm usually receiver heavy. This is one of the leagues where I just didn't take a lot of talent, so you didn't get to see me go receiver heavy. I think my receivers are like Paul Richardson, Malcolm Mitchell, and who else do I have? I don't know, Kenny Galladay. But I do like receivers, and I think it was the draft 2 years ago that really gave him a bad name, and then this past year with Corey Davis. I wasn't super high on Corey Davis. I think it's more of an aberration when you have drafts when you have Mike Evans and OBJ early on is something that you don't want to miss out on. And I think Cortland Sutton is actually profiles more of like a Devin Funchess or a Julio Jones, where he's just a freak athletically. So that's why. So to answer your question, I kind of jumped around it. I didn't have any pause to take him, especially without any receivers on my team. I took him. He was the next Devy guy, no question asked. No questions asked.
One thing that I think comes into play that maybe didn't get enough attention during the draft, or maybe everyone has their own draft strategies or dynasty strategies, but our scoring system isn't standard here. There's some things that come into play in terms of points per rush and things that or points per touch even that look like it makes running backs quite a bit more valuable. And looking at the scoring, from this year so far, there's only 2 receivers in the top 25 players overall, but we have 7 running backs in the top 27.
Wow. I didn't notice that. That's thanks for pointing that out. So if you're listening to this, you're getting the scoop from Fred, who tends to win all of his leagues. So maybe I was wrong taking a receiver here, but to be honest, I didn't really know many Devy guys outside the top 2 guys and then Sutton. But anyway, now that you may have divulged a little too much. Hopefully, no one listens for your sake. I just wanted to highlight some steals that I felt like people got them too late, and then some that got drafted way too early or wasted. And I think the first one, wild card, who I think is Wode.
Yeah, that's a stupid.
Got James Washington in the 15th round. It was like the 12th Devy pick. He stole James Washington here. It was the best Devy pick, in my opinion. Value-wise, hands down. If you go a little farther down the next round, Nightman Cometh and Manhunters got Calvin Ridley, the Alabama receiver, and Deion Kane. Forget where he plays. Clemson? Forget. Later on, and they're projected to be receivers that are certainly going to be teams looking in the first 3-4 rounds in the NFL draft. So, not using an early startup pick, but still getting a great Devy pick, a good strategy for them there.
Those are going to pay off for them well. Whether they keep these guys or end up trading them just on their names or hype, for where they got them, the payoff is awesome.
Yeah, so they're definitely winners there. You got Nick Chubb in the 9th round. It's kind of there wasn't any great value, but you didn't lose any value. I think that was a solid Devy pick for you there. That he should be he was supposed to come out last year, so he's coming out this year, at least in my opinion. Look, a couple duds. Hashtag Charlie Work definitely had one of the worst Devy picks in my opinion. He took LJ Scott in the 905, which was the 4th Devy pick. He was coming off a really hot year. If he was able to match his production that he did, he would certainly be in consideration. But Michigan State, the offense wasn't as potent as it was last year, and LJ Scott suffered greatly because of it. And that's why, he's projected to go as a late 3rd, early 4th rounder in this draft, according to Travis May. So, good thing is, I think he's a senior, so Charlie Work's going to get him on his team and fill in another Devy spot, but not the best pick.
Yeah, the problem here is that all of these Devy rankings right now are really kind of nebulous because it's just one man's opinion, or it's just based on what we've seen this most recent season. You put all these players in Indianapolis in pajamas and let them run around, and we'll get some real separation and more consensus about where these guys belong. There were, you look at a guy like Juju last year, and he had been considered, going into last season, I think probably as the number 1 Devy receiver. But by the end of the season, he had been surpassed by a lot of guys. And looking back at it now, after the NFL draft, after, this season, is he back to being the number 1 rookie receiver again? So I think, it's a little too much of what have you done for me lately, and not enough of what's the true potential here.
Yeah. So, looking at Devy players in this league, a lot of players which I think were fine picks, like Christian Kirk, St. Brown, the Notre Dame receiver. The quarterbacks that went later, it's fine. You're taking a quarterback there because he's a late round Devy guy, but you're not spending much on him. One interesting one that I want to point out was Poppins, Swan, took Mike Gesicki in the 18th round. He's actually a tight end. I didn't know much about him until I actually wrote down that she picked Gesicki out of Penn State. And he's actually projected to be the second or third tight end, not a tight end heavy draft like last year. So good find for her. I think he's definitely declaring. So definitely the only tight end I think that is owned in the Devy. So if you want a tight end, they're all available except for Gesicki.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about another owner who seems to do well in every league that she's in, you might want to take some notes because this is a tight end premium scoring system, and she's building around that.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know if she knows Mike Gesicki. State is one of her local colleges, so she might just, and which isn't a worse idea. I mean, if you're in a college area and you know more about one college team than the other, you know who their number one receiver is going to be, you go and you draft him. And, she decided to wait on the Devy spot. I think it, hopefully it pans out for her. It's definitely not, it's a pick where you're not going to blame someone for taking someone that's going to graduate and get drafted. And that's what brings me into my last point, is that we have two owners that are almost definitely going to be stuck with the same Devy pick that they had this year. And if I pull up my list, we have Philadelphia, which has Cam Akers going into his sophomore year at Florida State. I don't think he started this year. So
that means he's not even eligible, right?
Yeah, if you're going, you can't declare until after your sophomore year. So no matter what, we're going to have to wait and see on Cam Akers. So this is going to be Philadelphia's second year next year, and there's no guarantee that he comes into the draft, even if he plays well. So this is possibly a 2 to 4 year project on the number one running back coming as a freshman for Philadelphia. I don't like the strategy. Maybe this year you take him with your Devy pick, but I still don't think he's going to be the number one Devy pick this year.
Yeah, and considering the way our rules are set up where you can only own a single Devy player, that kind of screwed with me because all season long I was trying to make trades to win now and was wanting to trade away the rights to Nick Chubb. And nobody talked to me, nobody sent me anything, and I was like, what the hell? Well, it's because once you have a Devy player, you can't have a second one. And so you would have to give up your own in a trade or drop him to pick somebody else up. So it almost makes these Devy picks unmovable in some ways.
Yeah, right. Or at least tough, because anytime you make a Devy trade, you're going to have to evaluate both players and agree on their values, and they're so sporadic and they're not set. So, yeah, I was interested in Nick Chubb, but then you would have to trade for my Cortland Sutton, who I view higher. So it's you would have to get somebody like I'm looking at the Devy list right now, so it might be easier, but like a Nightcrawlers with Bo Scarborough or #Charlie with LJ Scott, who may have given up and say my Devy pick isn't going to pan out.
Right. Yeah.
So they value much less. That would be your targets to trade a Devy prospect too.
Yeah, and throughout the season, I didn't pay any attention to who owned which Devy players or where they were ranked, because I simply don't follow them all that closely. So it never came into consideration.
Yeah. So besides those, N'Keal Harry is the other guy for Charlie Goes America, who's going to be a junior this coming year. I haven't heard any draft talk with him, but he's having a good year, so that might change. And there's guys
considered the number one receiving Devy player, right? Their number one receiver.
N'Keal Harry?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. He's up there though.
What list are you looking at? I didn't think he was that high.
No. I'd seen his name around all year long, and
gotcha.
I guess I'll have to look up where the hell I found it.
I think when I looked up his stats when I was looking at this, he only had 4 or 5 touchdowns, 6'4", 210-pound receiver. So I didn't see anything. He's only 19 years old. Yeah, this year he's got 800 yards and 4 touchdowns, 9 games. But just to conclude that, I don't think he's declaring for this draft. So maybe it's not as bad as I'm saying it, but just because of our rules, it may not work if he doesn't get drafted. And that doesn't mean that your guy is going to get drafted. You know, injuries happen, situations happen that are out of our control. So you just kind of hope for the best. But I think, you know, if you're besides the few names we mentioned, your Devy pick was fine. Otherwise, you're going to get a player. You're going to be able to take another player, and we'll have to wait till the NFL season starts next year till we look back at this, right?
Yeah, and you know, from everyone's perspective at this point, it's just pray your guy survives college bowl season. We've seen way too many guys get hurt in that last game and aren't ready yet, even at the beginning of the NFL season, or it hurts themselves so much that they decide to stay in school an extra year.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about that. So I think we're ready to wrap up here. I think we're getting close to 2 hours, so hopefully we didn't bore you guys to death. Do you have any closing statements there, Fred?
I think my only closing statement is that I'm playing against House Reed in D96 and really, really, really want to beat him.
Yeah, because you'll never hear the end of it if he beats you.
Oh God, it will be terrible.
All right, so that does it here for our first ever Chardee MacDennis podcast. I would like to thank Fred for coming on and doing this with me. He helped me put together all the preview stuff, so I'm thankful that I didn't have to do it alone. And hopefully, White Walkers, you're happy with our product here.
It's worth everything he paid for it.
Yeah, all $0 he paid for it. But I'm thinking we do at least a playoff preview next week. Not long like this. We'll just talk about the 2 matchups, but a quick listen will probably be good for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's not a bad idea. And going behind the curtain a little bit here, if you want to cut this up and cut out the Devy discussion, paste it on to the playoff discussion next week to make these 2 slightly closer length discussions, that might work.
Yeah, that's actually probably a good idea, because this one's probably gonna be a little long. So if it doesn't sound different, it's probably the way to go. So yeah, you know what, I'm gonna try that. But now you guys know my editing skills, or if I don't have them. So now the pressure's on me. Thank you for listening, guys. We'll keep an eye on the stats, and we'll see how this league turns out. And until then, have a nice day, I guess, or have a nice night. I don't know. When are you listening to this?
Brace for the snowstorm.
Oh yeah, it's snowing. Good luck. All right. Peace.
Good night.